Is the industry going to die? No, it's not. But there is a significant risk that if we don't transform, we will simply run out of the workers necessary to construct the projects that our nation wants us to build, the next generation that's coming into our workforce. What they're telling us is they don't want to work long, inflexible hours in an industry that considers Excel spreadsheets to still be the height of technology. Forget productivity, forget the fact that we're now less productive than we were 30 years ago. Forget that. If for no other reason we have to change or we'll run out of workers.
Well, welcome back, team, to Built Different. I'm one of your co-hosts, Grant Hagen. Thank you all so much for tuning in here with us for episode 4. We hope you guys have been loving season 3. It's been really fun to get these new episodes out in front of y'all for this season. We have another great episode slated in here for you, this time with our friends down under. We got an opportunity to go down to Australia in Melbourne earlier this year and had a really great conversation with two friends that I think you're going to find a lot of heavy hitters and a lot of hot takes from. And Jon and Sumit. And so really excited to put this episode in front of you guys. One, it was just a really eye-opening experience to go down and really see just the built environment in another part of the world, literally across the world. And really, it was a great time to just really collaborate with them and hear kind of the challenges that they're going through down in that area that aren't too far from the challenges that we experience over here in the States. And so I'm really excited to get you guys in front of this episode to hopefully have some really fun takeaways. To that point, I wanted to just really bring up a few new things that we're doing this year. If you haven't caught into some of our trailers or other things that we posted out there, are live streams. So we are going to be doing a live stream here on Friday, September 15th. We are doing 2 of these really throughout the season 3 here, really just as an opportunity for you guys to engage with us, ask us questions, hear some thoughts and takeaways from some of these first episodes. One will be here in September, and the other one will be closer towards the end of the season. And so there'll be more information about that. I wanted to put that in front of you before we got into the episode here. And the second is our Built Different download. If you haven't seen those are fun little LinkedIn newsletters that we've been trying to just summarize and do show recaps for some of these episodes. And really just a fun and easy way to digest. If you don't have time to listen in or even watch some of these episodes, really those are just kind of the heavy hitters and takeaways from those episodes for you guys to also stay engaged with some of the audience and folks that we brought in on the show. So without further ado, we want to get you guys into these episodes, this one in particular with Jon and Sumit. And so we hope you guys enjoy this episode. We will see you on the live stream Friday, September 15th, and we will see you guys again here soon. Take care. Welcome back to the Built Different podcast. This is really fun. My first time over in Australia and joined with 2 friends that one I've just gotten to meet and one I've gotten to spend a little bit of time with Jon and Sumit. And thank you guys for coming in. This is really exciting. We have a lot of fun stuff that we're going to cover and talk about. But one, just thank you guys for coming in and joining.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great to have you. Have you had a chance to check out any kangaroos while you've been here?
I haven't. I've slowly been realizing how much is backwards from my normal in Australia. Not only, even the small things of like a revolving door, like we go into the right and you guys go into the left. So the small things that you...
metric, imperial.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about some of that stuff.
Yeah. That I'm not as concerned about. It's the normals of life. I got in the cab coming here to the event and quickly realized, wow, I have not at all experienced in having a driver on the right-hand side, which has been fun. But all things to say, we're going to talk about some really fun things on this episode around just this idea of what does it look like to get buy-in at an executive level. Jon, first, before we get into the actual conversation, would love for you guys to give a little background of who you are. Obviously, we're all the way across on the other side of the world, but have really been encouraged of just getting to know you guys through afar, and then also here in the last couple of days. But would love to hear your guys' backgrounds really quick, and then we'll get into some good stuff. Does that sound good? Jon, do you want to start us?
Yeah, sure. Look, I've been in the industry for over 30 years now and started out as a quantity surveyor. I know you probably don't have them in the States.
Quantity surveyor?
Quantity surveyor, cost manager, contracts manager, that sort of type of thing.
Okay.
I left the UK 25 years ago, went to the Middle East, had 10 years in the Middle East, just as the Middle East was starting to go nuts. And then came to Australia, where I've worked largely for main contractors or general contractors, as you would call them, in that sort of contracts and commercial space. And then more recently, after 30 years of contracts and commercial, which is, as you probably know, it's all about this all of the time. It's highly adversarial. I wanted to do something a little bit more positive. And that's when I got into the advocacy space, where I now am as the CEO of the Australian Constructors Association, who are the association looks after the interests of the major contractors in Australia that construct together over 90% of all infrastructure in the country.
Awesome. I have a very similar correlation to an organization over in the States called AGC, which is Associated General Contractors. And so have worked with them all the way up through school and obviously post-school into the career. But thank you for that quick intro. Sumit?
Yeah, look, not too much to say, to be honest. So I had an interesting sort of policy role, worked in government in a bit of an economics role, and saw an obscure role in an obscure association, and joined the association, which was AMCA.
Okay.
And then I was fortunate enough to become the executive director, so akin to Jon's position. And the last couple of years, I've been with Autodesk in our construction strategy practice. So yeah, it's a very unique position we're in.
And where are you from? Or here, obviously local in Melbourne.
Yeah, Melbourne, Australia.
Yep. Okay.
To all our listeners out in the US. So lived and born and raised in Melbourne.
And Jon, where you were from UK?
Yeah, originally from the northeast of England, yeah.
Okay. And you came over to Australia to start your career?
No, I actually started out my career in the UK.
Okay.
I left when I was 26, so I've now actually been longer away than I actually ever
So he's
lived
more
in
of
the
an
UK.
Australian now.
Okay.
More of an Australian, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Even got into Aussie rules now, so yeah.
We were talking earlier about just this idea of how construction in the last 20 years has really had these innovation leaps because of looking at other industries.
Yep.
And the question really begs of, hopefully one day other industries will look at construction and say, hey, what are they doing? Like, why are they setting the pace? And we've all seen the productivity graphs and the things that, highlight that. But I think that's a fair aspirational goal, right?
So this week we had our updated strategy day as ACA, and what we have recently agreed on as a 10-year strategy for the association is we want to see our industry transformed within 10 years to exactly what you've just said, an industry that industries point to as being best case.
I wasn't even in that meeting, so that's no, and it's true. And we'll get into some words like transformation, because that's what we were talking a little bit about earlier, and what that means. And it's a broad word that means a lot to a lot of people. But one last thing I want to ask, and then I'm curious to get your thoughts on a few things, is tell me about this idea of the kind of quote theme of the event. You walk around and see a lot of signs that say "Time for Change." How did that come about? What's the hope with that kind of call for action? Because you talk to, hey, we know what the problems are. We have a really good idea of the solutions. Maybe not to all of them, but we can start somewhere. But we got to start. Like, we have to go and do, which I think gets lost sometimes.
Yeah, and I think that we have reached a point. So we published a report at the end of last year called Disrupt or Die. And that sounds, that's a very sort of melodramatic title.
Yeah, I picked up on that, and that's why I did transform and prosper. But anyway.
But
both great terms, maybe a little different calls to action.
But at the end of the day,
you've got to put something out there too.
Right.
You've got to
shake the feathers a little bit.
Yeah,
Come on.
Yeah, that's right. But what do we actually mean by that? Is the industry going to die? No, it's not. But there is a significant risk that if we don't transform, we will simply run out of the workers necessary to construct the projects, the infrastructure that our nation wants us to build. We've seen, and we purposefully, these last 2 days, have had presentations and videos highlighting the views of Gen Z. So this is the next generation that's coming into our workforce. And what they're telling us is they don't want to work long, inflexible hours in an industry that considers Excel spreadsheets to still be the height of technology, and that doesn't care about the impact that it's having on the environment. So if for no other reason alone, forget productivity, forget the fact that we're now less productive than we were 30 years ago, which is a pretty big deal, but forget that, if for no other reason we have to change or we'll run out of workers. It's as simple as that. And I think the simplification of that issue and creating that or highlighting that burning platform is what has really brought those people together in that room. That is a concept that everyone can understand, and it's a concept that everyone is seeing. Whether you're working for a government and in a government delivery agency, they can't find the people. If you're working for a head contractor, they can't find the people. So we all recognize that this is a problem that we have, and therefore, if for no other reason, we need to do something.
A thought that comes to mind is urgency is contagious.
Absolutely.
I mean, you come from the industry of being on a job, and the job is closing to an end, and the urgency...
Was he urgent getting away from that sewer? There's a photo of you there.
Oh my gosh, that was yeah. For the folks listening, there's some great pictures highlighting Jon at the keynote here, which was
Where
great.
was that, in Dubai?
A previous project, I've worked on some extremely glamorous projects in my time, including upgrading of the Abu Dhabi sewage pumping network, yes.
Urgency, a lot of forms. But in that point, though, urgency is something I think people can rally behind, right? And you talk about the importance of it. And that was honestly one of my favorite things I saw this week was hearing from the generation that will carry the torch through many more years to come. And you hear it from them, not just in audio, but you see and feel the passion that they're saying that in, of like, oh, yeah, that's real. Like, that's not just
when you hear that video. That video for me was really compelling,
and they were very articulate.
Absolutely,
those young people, weren't they?
And if you're a Gen Z listening here, we hear you.
Absolutely. And we had one of the
must be all the TikTok videos that they're making.
We'll make these into some TikTok reels to say, we hear you, we hear you.
But there was a recent graduate from one of our members, and one of the questions was, would you recommend our industry to someone else? And they said, look, I think there's two people here. Person A, someone that likes walking their dog and going out for nice midweek meals? No. If you want to work long hours and make a lot of money, absolutely. But we need to transition our industry into a state where you can make money, you can have a good time solving problems, and you can still go and walk the dog and go out for nice midweek meals.
I think
it's a great point. Interestingly, just having a little bit of a think about what you were saying, Jon, it's the piece around, promoting this industry as an industry of first choice, because there's if we think about the opportunities that are happening in a variety of different sectors, and hopefully gravitating, individuals to see that there is a career pathway for them. So there is that position that they're coming in, and this is what your 10-year journey looks like in our organisation. This is the 10-year journey that looks like being associated with the ACA. And I think those are some of the things that often get missed, and that's where we get this competitive tension constantly, where, what are we sitting down with these young entrants and showing them that this is the future, and look at the great things. You're driven by net zero, emissions. You want to be part of that quest of dealing with climate challenges that we have. So these are some of the things that they're going into the employers. What's your position on that? And if we can't enunciate that, then we're going to lose them straight away, because a lot of businesses are putting metrics around those things to achieve, and it means something to them. So
absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, I think what I have appreciated about organizations like AGC in the States, and also hearing a little bit more about ACA here, is just the idea that when you talk about cross-generational functions, I mean, bias here a little bit in construction, man, there's so many generations that work together when you think about the needs from a performance and just title on a job, on a construction project. I mean, I remember coming out of school and it's like, man, I'm working with someone that could retire in, 2 or 3 years. And that was 4 or 5 generations across that. And I appreciate how ACA, AGC, these organizations are really highlighting that, and addressing is not the right word, but bringing it to the forefront of, hey, why would we not talk about that? Like, if we're not talking about it, it would kind of show that maybe we don't have an understanding of what our cross-section of our industry is and how we best serve them. And how
it's pretty powerful when your major competitors are in a room and all pushing forward that this is where our industry needs to be. I think that's fantastic endorsement with what you said, John, because it's very hard to get competitors to agree on these sort of long-term things because their project pressures and the way they're drilled and the way they're organised. And
we just brushed over that everyone's here and they're like, yes, I agree with you. And that's not normal. Nor are there maybe events that enable that to be normal. That's the other reality of, I think, why organizations like you guys are really promoting that and not just talking the talk, but like, hey, come and experience it. Like, you may have heard about what this FCon event is and why it's important, but hey, come and see almost.
Absolutely, and without giving too much away in my wrap-up speech later on.
Please do. The floor is
Don't worry, this is going to be released before. We're going to actually play this when you're standing up on the stage or something.
But the given that we have such strong agreement on these issues, my challenge to everyone leaving the event today is going to be each and every one of you can walk that talk. Even if you just change one thing in how you operate, whether that is in a government delivery agency, as a contractor, as a lawyer, whatever that may be.
Technologist.
A technologist even, yes. We all have the ability here to influence change and achieve the transformation of the industry that we all agree is absolutely necessary and completely desired. We can all play our part in that.
Yeah, well said. Great context, because I think that hopefully will give us a little bit of runway of some stuff I wanted to get into, and really what we had talked about is just, so you say day one, broad issues, right? Things that are kind of big picture of sorts, and in this day two, which we're in today, is just this idea of technology's impact on that, right? I mean, unfortunately, Gen Z probably gets a little bit too much rap of being the most technological advanced, generation for a lot of great reasons. But I'm curious to know why maybe that kind of format of the event, how that played out, because obviously we're here representing a software company. Summit is here to represent a software company. And I'm curious how that's kind of played into the dynamic of making this event successful too.
That's a really good question. I think that essentially it's important to identify in the first instance what are the key issues that we're trying to resolve and how some of those issues are interlinked. And once you have that clear picture of what it is, the problems that we've got, then you can start getting into solutions, which is obviously where technology has a big part to play. But also what it flushes out, because we already know by this stage that technology has a big part to play in resolving these issues. But also what are the impediments to the adoptions of that technology? Because what you see walking, it's great, you walk around the halls here and the problem is not lack of technology. It's not lack of solutions. We've got plenty of solutions. Why are they not being adopted? We had BIM came out, what was that now, 30 years ago, and yet there are still some clients where we heard about one story today where on the delivery side, the Major Transport Infrastructure Authority are doing all these this big infrastructure works, and they're using digital twins, and they're creating all this data that they then have to convert back to 2D drawings because the operational authorities don't have the capacity to deal with that. So these are the sort of the fundamental impediments to adoption of technology that we really need to focus on, because the problem is not finding digital solutions to this. It's why are those solutions that are already there not being adopted?
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, one of the things I was thinking about, John, when I was presenting, and I hope I got the message across, was that we can tap into some of our networks within the organisation and maybe keep it at a bit arm's length, that it's not that, this software can sort out all your problems. Let's talk about some of those change management processes that you're trying to achieve. What are some of those business outcomes that you're trying to achieve? And actually getting someone to facilitate that and bring it out together and go, okay, for this particular area, these are some of the values that, value drivers that you're trying to achieve. how are you going to get there? What are some of the capabilities that underpin those that you need to achieve, and how can the team orientate around achieving those, and what sort of structure do they need to support? And that's, from my perspective, that's the offer that I'd love to put to you, John, is help finding the right person to facilitate sessions around that to support the association. I think that would be valuable.
I think some things that we've had on these episodes is, and I've been amazed at some of the answers to this question, like, what is the software's responsibility in this? Because you mentioned earlier...
To make it more confusing.
Clearly, right? But, I mean, it's an interesting question that I've gotten some really interesting responses, because you say, hey, there's clearly not a lack of software technology to apply to these tools, but I almost wonder, like, it's clear people don't start with problem statements. They don't start with how this is going to impact their business, or what the needs of, quote unquote, the business are to be impacted by solutions like software, right? Like, is there anything on the software or technology side that we could or should be doing that would make that a little more effective, maybe? I'm trying to think if that's the right word to use there.
Yeah, I mean, that is a good question. You really got my brain going there. I think one of the impediments to adoption of technology is, and software in particular, a lot of these solutions are all focused on open and transparent sharing of information or leveraging information. And one of the issues that I think has been a barrier to adoption of that technology is that we contract still in a very adversarial way. And so information is considered to be important from the point of view of being able to be used to develop a claim from a contractor to a client, or to defend a claim from a client by a client from a contractor. And so when that data is being used for those means, then there is a real reluctance to share that data.
Opening up the kimono, I think they call it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know whether that... I probably haven't answered your question there, because I'm not sure.
No, I think you have. It's the procurement piece, which is very important. And the procurement piece is important because there could be opportunities where in the US you talk about integrated project delivery, or we could call it earlier contractor involvement. What's the incentive? How can I incentivize you to support me earlier in really coming up with something that's can be designed, can be constructed and operated differently? And what are those procurement opportunities before we start talking about the technology piece? Then we can start to bring the teams together and say, okay, tier one contractor that's going to use all of these subcontractors, you come up with the best ideas and we'll position the arrangement accordingly. Obviously, you have to test the market, you have to price it, but at least they're starting to see some goodwill, that it's not going to be some hero project and then we do another 6 very average projects after it. So, yeah, I think you're right, John. I totally think the procurement piece is very important, and also trying to encourage some of the participants to come forward differently.
Yeah, the note I wrote was like, when you have intention to use the data in a maybe malicious way, maybe that's not the best way to approach it. Meaning, like, I hope I can use this to better defend myself, or I hope I can use this to save my butt on something down. It's like,
that's right, yeah.
Hey, let's maybe take a pause here. Is that the best way to think about how these tools are helping you? Like, why don't we go to the source of some of these issues that how contracts are written?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I think this is something that we... this is going to be a real challenge, actually. And it's something that I've been trying to give a bit of thought to, is we really need to fundamentally transform how our industry is valued. I did a LinkedIn post a few weeks ago now where I compared the construction industry to the manufacturing industry, or more particularly manufacturing tins of baked beans, right? And I said, here we are as a construction.
There was quite a bit of traction on that post.
There was like 200,000 views.
Wow.
Yeah, it was
Sitting across from a LinkedIn
influencer.
there we go.
I think the
Gen Zs
they
are-
talk TikTok, so we have to get that on TikTok. I think
So
get him off LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Needs to get to the new platform.
Skyrocket.
But the point I was making here was that the construction industry is a highly skilled industry that solves complex problems every day, and yet it currently makes a return of 2 to 3% on the capital it employs, and yet, without trying to be too derogatory about manufacturing tins of beans, it's a pretty low risk industry, and yet when I check the latest figures for Heinz, they're making 10% at that. Why is that? We need to get to a stage where our efforts are appropriately valued, and if we can get to that stage, then what we'll see a number of things. We'll see some of those defensive behaviors drop away, but we'll also see that these businesses, and this has come up on a few panels, when we look at the percentage of revenue that these construction companies are investing in R&D, it's minuscule.
Yeah, I think there's a global report,
Yeah.
and it talks about 1.7%.
I was gonna throw a number out, but it was gonna be.
I think there is a report that was done by Deloitte. It was more IT focused, and it was something in in that ballpark. I could be wrong, but I think it was around 1.7%.
But you ask yourself, why is that? And I think it's pretty simple, basically. And again, it's melodramatic to say this, but the reality is that contractors are simply focused on staying alive. They're going from one project to the next. They might make a big loss on one project, so they go chasing the next project to recover as an opportunity to recover those losses. So you're constantly just focused on essentially trying to make some sort of return. And if you don't have that stable return that a manufacturing industry has, are we surprised that there isn't so much investment?
It's a great point. And when you think about the global scenario that we've faced over the past 2 years with COVID, being in a position before that to win work and have it priced at a certain perspective and lock in supply chain and all of those things, to start deliver those projects a couple of years later, as you know, it does take time to win a job and then start commencing construction, and then you see the impact happening to those businesses now and the challenges that they have with price escalation and other things. So, there's many aspects to it, and it's put the industry on a lot of challenges at the moment, globally.
Yeah, this is a very random question. And are you saying tinder beans?
No, tins. Sorry, it might be the accent.
Baked beans. Have you had baked
beans? Sorry, cans.
I love that.
Cans of beans.
I was like, is he saying wood beams? Like timber?
No.
Tin beans.
Cans of beans. And
it's a staple in the UK. They have baked beans on toast.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Us Americans just call them baked beans, but I like tin beans.
But just to round that one out as an interesting point, and it did get such a lot of traction, which was partly due to the fact that the people that are involved in manufacturing those baked beans jumped into the thread and got quite upset that I was potentially being derogatory to the manufacturing industry. So,
and then John West jumped in as well and said, "Hey, what are you talking about? Our tuna cans, we make 15%." No, I was joking.
Oh wow, man, that it hit the LinkedIn algorithms.
It did. And that definitely did. Yeah.
But I think you talk about awareness, and it's even simple posts like that, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, you have your head down so much and you're focused so much on the survive or die. Maybe that's like the current state of the industry more than disrupt and die, or die. And I think the challenge with that too is just like, hey, wake up. Like, hey, this is happening, whether you choose to look down and keep going or look up and actually start doing something around that. I love being able to correlate to other industries and just see what else is going on, because it helps. We were talking about this earlier. It just helps bring context to things, and almost like a color commentary of, maybe that is right. And sometimes the analogies works, and sometimes they break down, and sometimes they hit the LinkedIn algorithm, and it takes off. But no, that's really interesting to think. And I had a colleague that mentioned a little bit more around the correlations to the shipbuilding industry. Like, I think some people, I've heard at least some people kind of have challenges of equating construction to manufacturing for a whole host of factors. But then you look at maybe types of manufacturing, like ship manufacturing. This gentleman was from South Korea. And shipbuilding.
They build so quickly.
Yeah. And just like, what can we learn from that industry alone? And things like control and things like reality capture and modeling and prefabrication.
I think there's a really important point that you've hit on there, is that we've hidden as an industry behind this excuse that we can't do all of this thing because every project's different. There's no two projects are the same. We hide behind this. But the reality is that, yes, at the highest possible level, everything is different. But when you start to break it down into the component parts, how we pour concrete from one project to the next isn't different. How we erect steel from one project to the next isn't different. We're making excuses up.
Time for change.
Absolutely.
Well said. And I kind of get chills thinking about the folks that I know that have said that. And it's like, man, okay, what is that really doing? It's really going back to the problems solutions do. Like, it's going back to the problems. We still have these problems. We're never going to solve them. It's like, no, there are solutions here. You can choose to embrace those, or you can just go through this cyclical loop of back to the problems and kind of hide behind it. Yeah, well said. One, I want to be cognizant of your time. I know that this is the hardest part.
Once you get him going, just maximize it. He's okay. It's only 2:00. He can still go.
It's the hardest part of these because you get into such great conversation, and it.
I promised you 10 minutes, didn't I?
Yeah.
Once you warm him up, he's ready to go.
It's really helpful to see because, John, you're in a unique role because you get to interact and interface with a lot of these executives across a lot of different companies and almost aggregate what you're kind of seeing as a part of these themes. I'm curious, maybe... Are
you familiar with the term herding cats?
Very much. We have a lot of cats in the States and a lot of cat herders in the States. But I'm curious, as you've seen some themes across these executive individuals that you've gotten to interact with, what would you say are some of the categories of maybe either lack of interest or the lack of desire to use technology to address some of these problems? Like, I think everyone has their own kind of preconceived notions of what may be going on, but you are in a unique position that you get to kind of see what's been bubbled up from a lot of these executive teams. Because the focus of these episodes that we've been releasing recently is really around this idea at the executive level of, hey, technology isn't going anywhere. And I hate to say it that way, but hey, what if we are that industry that people look to? Like, that is way more ambitious of a goal rather than like, I better use this because the Gen Zs are coming. And does that make sense? Like, I'm curious, as you see these themes, what themes stand out of just not wanting to embrace the idea of technology?
I think it's interesting that I think historically, if you look at the main area of technology, coming back to building information modeling again now, where there's been very much a view that the benefits with that accrue primarily to the client. So this isn't a thing that I'm doing for me. This is a thing that I'm doing as a sell or something that the client has asked for. Yes, there might be something in this from me from a point of view of, I don't know, clash detection or whatever. But the ultimate benefit here is to the client in their ongoing operation and maintenance of the asset. There is a sort of growing realization now, and the other thing I should say, importantly as well, is the piecemeal nature of some of these digital solutions. The fact that you can get a solution for just picking someone out at random. Here we've got a software provider called Docketbook, so getting rid of paper dockets on sites, receipts on sites. And then there'll be another solution for something else, and another some solution for something else niche.
Yeah.
And this is being resolved now. It's starting to be resolved now, and obviously
it's a really good point, because since if we think about from 2010 and to where we are in 2023, a real proliferation of point solutions, as John was.
Point solutions. That was,
So
that was a term I was looking for.
So if we think about the industry, if you think of any use case, there was an offering. There is something, and as time has gone on, a lot of the strategists have been pushed by their customer base to say, well, that's not good enough anymore because we need to start to standardise on some of the aspects that John was mentioning. And we can't standardise on all of these point solutions, so what does it look like? So the conversation's now shifted to sort of this platform conversation, but enabling open API environment for others to participate in the ecosystem. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to support that.
I honestly think that will be a game changer from an adoption perspective. I think that has been a real barrier to date.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I think is going to change, I think the whole Gen Z thing is another driver for change, because us old crusties recognise that they don't want to come in there with it and work off Excel spreadsheets.
That term crosses borders and crosses seas. I love that. Keep going.
And so you're starting to see this confluence of reasons. And the other big one that we haven't really touched on today is the overall environmental sustainability piece.
And we did some work together last year on that, actually. And I was very proud of the work that we did there. Do you remember what we did? Forgotten. It's been a long time since we've spoken about it. But
demonstrating the importance of technology and focusing on this issue of environmental sustainability, in that ultimately all of these issues that we're talking about are interlinked: culture, sustainability, digital, productivity. And if we're looking at
data measurement, capabilities, skills, procurement, and it was a partnership piece with the ACA, Infrastructure Sustainability Council, and Consult Australia, and we were invited to be part of that conversation. And it turned out to be with a pretty good understanding of opportunities that can be explored, and we've got some ideas of how we could work together. But
interesting,
obviously need some support from the greater industry for those things.
But from where does technology fit into this? Technology is going to help us to become more efficient, to become more productive. What is productivity about? It's doing more with less. How is that important? That's an environmental benefit. If we all about cutting out waste and doing more with less. So all of these things, it's really actually quite exciting at the minute, because as I mentioned before, there is now this real coming together of views that we're in strong alignment that this is what we need to do for a whole bunch of reasons: productivity, environment, running out of people. We just need to get on and do it.
Yeah. I don't want to suggest this as your term for next year, your hashtag, as we've seen. A phrase I've heard and brought up on these episodes has been start simply and simply start. And I think people get overwhelmed by this idea that, where do I start? Or how do I start? It's like, just start simply and don't overthink it and don't overdo it.
Well, one of the key points that on a similar vein that I wrote down, and we'll probably use it in my wrap up today, is someone said, just have a crack.
It's a very Australian term.
It's like an Australian version of what you just said.
So if you think of a football match and the ball's there and it's muddy and one guy he doesn't want to get his jumper dirty or muddy, so he just holds back, and then the supporter base, Jon Davies at the back, goes, have a crack. Go and get the ball.
Go get it.
Yeah, that sort of thing.
Hey, I'm writing these terms down because my glossary, not only in construction, is now longer, but my Aussie glossary is even longer. Back to summarize a little bit of what I heard you say of kind of the why of some of that lack of excitement of using technology is like kind of this idea of what's in it for us.
Yeah.
And plenty, like there are plenty of things that are in it for you, and the contractual things do help, right? It's like, hey, like if you have owners that are educated and they understand the value of the systems and tools that they're going to get to actually operate these buildings once they get handed over to them, like we don't talk often enough about how we are just the start of these buildings living their life. And we often just think, oh, well, on to the next one. It's like, hey, if we are going to build a sustainable future, that means these buildings need to be sustainable. And not only that, but they need to have a way in which they can be operated sustainably as well. And what's in it for me? Well, if you care about your clients and you care about your buildings as much as you say you do in the project, hey, what about the 50 years or 100 years or 200 years they're going to operate that building and be in that building or have that be a part of, their system? So I have one last question. I keep looking down because we are cresting 45 minutes, which too, I really do appreciate.
It's gone very quick.
Yeah, it has gone quick. But to maybe kind of land the plane of sorts and really maybe kind of to wrap up, I want to hear both of your guys' kind of calls to the individuals that you work with maybe the most. And obviously we get to go hear you here in a few hours of kind of the closing statements. But what would you want to say to folks that wouldn't be able to come to an event like this or don't know how they can get involved in an organization like ACA, like AGC, maybe back in the States? Like, what would you want to say to those individuals?
I'd want to say that we're all part of the problem historically, and therefore we're all part of the solution. It doesn't matter where you sit within our industry, everyone has a role to play. I'm fortunate in my role in being in a position to greatly influence outcomes in certain areas. But everyone, to a certain extent, has the ability to do that, especially in this day and age through social media. We put out a lot through LinkedIn, and it is incredibly important to see that engagement and get people talking about the issues and engaging in those issues. And the other thing that I challenge everyone is challenge what you're seeing on a day-to-day basis. Don't accept that is just how it is and it can never change. Really challenge that status quo, and it's only by doing that and everyone looking to make just a small change themselves that will all add up to the size of the change that we're all looking to see happen.
Well said.
Look, from my perspective, it's really being that trusted partner. And, sure, we work in an organisation that is driven by the quarter and financial performance. And, we'll never move away from that. But I think we need a level of conversation at that position where there is a understanding that we actually want to help and support the industry. So the initiatives that I'm trying to be inclusive about is doesn't matter, what competitors are around the table, but how can we support and ultimately be seen as partnering appropriately. So focusing on some of those solutions, which I mentioned yesterday, whether they're technical, procedural, cultural, I think we've all got, pockets of excellence within our own organisation and our own networks to be able to facilitate those. And that can be small things. It could be, facilitating study tours that are happening in the US and getting US contractors to speak to Australian contractors that aren't in a competitive space. And then they can have peer groups and talk about some of the challenges that they have, benchmarking challenges. Obviously, you've got to be very careful how you do all of these things, but just have a forum, a unique forum where these contractors feel a level of comfort and can start to open up and solution around some of the things that have been prevailing issues.
Yeah, and I think that hits well to your point you mentioned earlier, is just there is a lack of trust. And man, work or personal life, where there is a lack of trust, there is not going to be a lot of growth. Mm-hmm. And there's not going to be a lot of depth in a lot of ways. And yeah, well said. I mean, from the tech side of things, it's like we in a unique way have an opportunity to help embrace and enhance
because
trust.
We want to support the incumbents. And if the incumbent contractors aren't here tomorrow, where are they coming from? And that's, if they fail, we fail, the economy fails, it's a disaster. People don't want to work in our industry. That's not great.
Yeah.
So we do have a shared responsibility, but we can't be judgmental. We can't just say, oh, well, we're the technology, you should do this, and you should look at manufacturing and look at all these sectors. We're being insulting. There are great things that are happening in the industry. We should highlight those, and we should always challenge those. But I think it's a different, dynamic, unique way of engaging, and it's got to be long term. So, more than happy to work with Jon and his team as always. And from my perspective, congratulations on a great event, and congratulations on a really clear policy platform, Jon and your team. So
yeah, okay. Well, likewise, and I don't know if this is a more state-driven phrase, but it has definitely come up on a lot of these episodes. Is just the rising tide rises all ships. And
absolutely.
It's hard to see that change over time. It's hard to see that, when you're so interested
or when the tide goes out, you see whether people are wearing bathers. That's another one. That's what contractors tell me as well. Have you heard that one, Jon?
Yep, that's pretty good. Maybe I'll add that one to the list here too. But it is true. It's you don't see that change over time until you reflect back and see, wow, man, look how far we have come. And oh, by the way, it wasn't just our ship; it's all of these ships that are in.
I think that's where initially with your policy direction and positioning, you were getting uniformity around those three areas first, and then from there your program aligns to that, and it's a reinforcement. If you don't reinforce that message, then there is no message. And I think that's why ACA's, this is what we stand for, this is what we want. Mm-hmm. We want to represent the best businesses that are doing the best things by their people, who are their most important asset. And how do we provide opportunities? What does a 10-year career pathway look like for someone that's entering today?
Yeah.
How does that support the industry and beyond?
Well, what we got so excited about was, the initiative of what we're trying to do through episodes and shows like this on Built Different is really that idea of a community that is obsessed with questioning the status quo. And clearly, Jon, you've built that here within this event, but not only that, but ACA as well. And it is something that you want to find opportunities for more people to engage in these conversations and hear. And we are obviously clearly fortunate to be at an event like this to engage with that, but really the hope of these episodes is to take that even farther into people that have come across some of those same challenges and need to be encouraged in a way that they maybe not have an opportunity to come to these and maybe come to them in future opportunities. And so with that, one, thank you to both. This is, I feel more lucky to maybe host these opportunities and conversations, but it really is a treat, and we do appreciate you guys making the time. And we are mid-event getting Jon.
That's what he does. Wouldn't it be funny if we just kept him in this room for the rest of the afternoon?
Hey,
and then just played this.
I think that could work. We could see with the AV team if they could just hit run back and play on it. But no, it really is so great. Truly, we do apprioate the time and thank
pleasure.
you. And
generosity as well, Jon.
Yeah,
appreciate it, and the partnership of this event. What I've loved about it is we've got very, very senior people who have actually walked around and introduced themselves and made it really personable, and that's an ornament to the industry. If you think about some of the businesses that these individuals are running, they've actually been accessible, and that's what we love about this event. It's great.
Yeah, and that doesn't happen by happenstance. It takes a ton of effort and intentionality, and that obviously comes on display in these events. So likewise, congratulations. It really is great, and I know you would say there's a huge team of people that help make that a possibility. And
Megan Anderson, you've got to meet her.
Megan, you got a shout out here. No, we haven't forgot you, but too, thank you to both. This is really great. Appreciate those that are listening in, and we hope that you had something to start simply and simply start and really inspire the change in the individuals and teams and companies and projects that you're working on. So thank you for tuning in with us. We hope this was a fun and engaging conversation for those that are listening in or watching in, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us, and a safe journey back to Dallas.
Here we go. Let's head back home. Thank you, team. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Make sure to subscribe to Built Different on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. Let's build this community together.